I always thought that the whole point of telling good stories is to inspire other people. When I was young in the 70s, women were talking about feminism in a positive way. The second wave of feminism, I felt inspired. As a woman who has enjoyed a lot of the rights and freedoms of feminism as a single woman, able to have a great career, I still want to push these pro-choice and feminist messages. Getting into this new third wave of feminism to fight for our reproductive rights, I wanted to take back the word feminism, meaning everybody's equal. We're not going to give up all the progress that we've already made. We have to continue to make even more progress. We all need to stick together and make sure we continue to be inclusionary.
Welcome to Angel City Culture Quest, where art, social justice, and the environment meet in Los Angeles. I am your host, Melina Paris, and I welcome you to this episode. Hello, folks. Welcome to Angel City Culture Quest. Today, we're talking to filmmaker Pamela Torrance in discussion of her documentary, We're Not Going Back, and how in a leap of faith, she journeyed from earning a science doctorate to producing her pro-choice documentary. Hi, Pamela. I'm so happy to have you here today.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for being here on this bright, sunny morning. Here is some background on our guest. From her start in science to sales, and now embracing storytelling, a lifelong love, Pamela enjoys tapping into her right brain in service to creative endeavors. Her love of logic and puzzles at a young age naturally guided her to pursue science. Pamela earned a doctorate in molecular and cell biology from UC Berkeley, and then worked for a few years in drug discovery. But after realizing she was more social than studious, she pivoted to a career in sales in the pharmaceutical development industry for many years. Pamela has always had a love for stories and endless curiosity. Now she focuses on storytelling with her film and video production company, Torrance Productions, LLC, which seeks to tell stories that have a positive impact on the world and to help others be seen in their best authentic light. In May 2022, when the SCOTUS leak threatened to overturn Roe v. Wade and strip half the country of their reproductive right protections, Pamela quit her corporate sales job and embarked from her California bubble to red states to capture the harrowing and mundane stories of American women. The resulting documentary, We're Not Going Back, won a grand jury award for Emerging Filmmaker when it premiered at the Awareness Film Festival in 2022. Since then, Pamela continues her pro-choice activism with her feminist blog and podcast, the HisTerical Society. And here is some information about We're Not Going Back. The film is a pro-choice documentary film from 2022, before and after the Supreme Court of the United States overturned Roe v. Wade with its Dobbs decision, taking away the constitutional right to abortion, abandoning almost 50 years of precedent, and paving the way for states to ban abortion. Pamela captured stories from red states to educate and promote awareness of what's at stake now that Roe has fallen, and to encourage everyone to vote in what Pamela dubbed Roevember. It's a great film, by the way. Thank you for making that.
It was a labor of frustration.
Very timely, though. So after starting your blog in January 2023, you launched the HisTerical Society Feminist podcast in July to coincide with the one-year anniversary of Dobbs. It began on the first week of July. So how has the podcast experience been for you?
Oh, it's been really great so far. It's only been a few months, but I've really enjoyed meeting interesting people and hearing their perspectives and being able to incorporate that into the different episodes for my listeners.
You have a lot of different perspectives. First, there was one I didn't get to catch up to with Reverend Deneen Robinson.
Yes, she was one of the professional folks in the film. I wanted to catch up with her a year later for the podcast earlier this summer and get an update from her as she's been in Texas and living and breathing these bans and all of the kind of craziness that's been going on in that red state. And so it was really great to include her.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely have to go back and listen to that because I really loved her in your film. But I also wanted to get to the Male Allies episode. That was from July of this year. You speak to different men who represent different generations. First, you featured Ted Clem, and then you recruited the other two along the way who were younger than Ted. What prompted the Male Allies episode?
Well, I had been pushing social media when I started the film process. For over a year, I had been out there on Instagram and Facebook trying to push pro-abortion messaging with new blog posts or new podcast episodes. But what was interesting is that whereas most of the folks like me who are out there doing this type of social media work, most of us are women, of course, because it's a very female issue, abortion and abortion rights, there were a few men out there. And I was really just intrigued, and I felt inspired by these cis heterosexual men who were really caring about the issue as much as I was, and my cohort as well. And so they were really putting out good messaging and liking my posts and interacting with the things that I was putting out there. So I really wanted to include some men who have the right perspective or the left perspective, as it were, and can help inspire their colleagues, their cohorts, and their friends and allies to join the fight.
That's encouraging. So can you tell us a little bit about the men you featured?
Absolutely. So first up was Ted. And I think Ted's really the one who inspired me to do the episode from the beginning, because he's kind of an older guy. He's in his mid 70s and living in Texas, living in Austin, and really getting out there with all of these mostly younger women, but allies for the fight and doing a lot of protesting. Even before the Dobbs decision came down, Texas had been suffering under SB 8 for over 9 months. So he got involved right away. I mean, here was this 76-year-old man sitting literally on the ground in the Capitol in Austin. And I was just really struck by how great it was to see somebody literally getting off the couch. It was wonderful.
Doing the work, yeah. Ted calls the abortion bans evil. In your show, he talked about going to Washington, D.C. in June 2022 to protest the SCOTUS ruling on Dobbs, where he said he got on that bullhorn for 45 minutes, protesting, in his words, MAGA fascist old white men. And that post went viral. Ted actually moved to Austin in the throes of the SB 8 abortion ban ruling, or the Heartbeat Act, which he called deplorable. And Ted called for men to stand up for the women they love and others they are close to who do not want to be subjugated to a second-class status where they cannot make their own choice. Then there was Chuck. Can you tell us a little bit about Chuck from Indiana?
Absolutely. Chuck is of mixed race, and he has daughters. And I think at the time we spoke, he had a granddaughter on the way who's now joined us in this world. So he cares a lot about the women in his life. He's probably in his 40s-ish. I think he wanted to jump in and get involved and push back on a lot of the online misinformation and trolls that are out there on this topic. But I think he realized that he maybe didn't have all of the information himself. So I was really impressed with the amount of research and work that he had done, just as a more keyboard warrior than Ted getting out there on the streets. But Chuck really took it upon himself to make sure he was educated about the different issues and kind of understanding all of the nuances so that he can be a loud voice also as an ally for the cause for us.
They're both valid positions to fight from, both online and in person. I want to note, Chuck said leaders of these groups on the other sides of these issues, like abortion, have done their research as well. However, they leave out large portions of information and facts. He said they've gotten it down to a science. So they're speaking in partial truths to gain believers, and then they cite incomplete facts in an opaque way to fool people. Ultimately, Chuck said that men have to help protect women and our daughters so that they can grow to be who they want to be, and that younger men need to get involved in this fight.
He was so motivated, I think, to be a positive voice and make sure that the right information was being disseminated out there.
Yeah. You had said early on that you wanted to include men in your feminist podcast because you want men to listen and feel part of the movement. You also said having male allies in your podcast early was an idea because the word feminism gets a bad rap. and it's been hijacked. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think when I was young in the 70s, I think women, I was a little girl back then, but I noticed that women were talking about feminism in a positive way. We had just recently overcome massive civil rights issues. If you look back to what's called the second wave of feminism in the 1960s, since then, the term feminism has been more kind of hijacked by the patriarchy, who are basically trying to make it a bad term that's sort of anti-man or a man-hater type of term. And as a woman who has enjoyed, I think, a lot of the rights and freedoms and societal pressures or lack thereof of feminism as a single woman and been able to have a great career that wasn't being a nurse or a teacher, I really wanted to change that. So I wanted to take back the word feminism and make it be more positive. And what it really truly means is sort of equality. And as now kind of getting into this new, maybe a third wave of feminism to fight for our reproductive rights, the term feminism is still kind of has this stigma attached to it. And even on the other kind of side of the spectrum, there are these TERFs, which I think stands for trans exclusionary radical feminists.
Yes, that's it.
I do not stand for that either. Those folks are radical, in my opinion. And I want to make sure that the word feminism just comes back to where it really belongs, which is just meaning everybody's equal. And I'm an inclusionary feminist in that sense. So I guess I wanted to use the word in its appropriate context to make sure that we can keep the hijackers at bay.
Getting back to the root of it.
Get back to the root.
I do remember hearing the term man-hater in regard to feminism when I was a child, again, in the 70s, like you. I even remember my father making mention of that like a joke, like people actually are saying this, like it's a man-hater, like how could this be? So it's almost as if these people on the opposing side are trying to resurrect this again as a man-hater term, like they're going back to the old toolbox again.
We're not going to give up all the progress that we've already made. They are trying to put us back. So we have to continue to make even more progress and make sure we continue to be inclusionary and not let these folks change the definition of the word.
That's the big thing that happens, is trying to change definitions of words, and it just confuses people. And I think that that's the aim. But let's talk more about your filmmaking. Now, while your film, the documentary, is not an LA film, you said that your next film, which is a drama, will be filmed here. Notably, the anchor location is in the Seventh Heaven Jail at the top of the city municipal building on Beacon Street in San Pedro. For some background on Seventh Heaven, the jail operated from October 1928 until its closure in June of 1962. It was designed to house about 60 male prisoners on the north side of the jail and 40 female prisoners on the south side. The new facility was expected to save the city money, as it would now no longer be necessary to transport female prisoners to the Lincoln Heights facility near downtown LA. Seventh Heaven is the nickname for the jail, with its sweeping views of the harbor. It has been in several films. Can you talk about how the jail fits into your next film?
Yeah, I kind of fell in love with that jail. I happened to be in the municipal building for a mixer with the Chamber of Commerce, and somebody said, let's go up and check out the jail, which I didn't even know was there. And it does sit there kind of as a museum piece, if you will. It's not in use anymore, but it's beautiful in a grungy jail way. And I just got inspired by having the idea that this would make a great film set. So in my film, it'll double as a Southern jail because the film, is going to be set in a red state, not any specific states, but just any of these red states with the horrible abortion laws that they already have in place. And what I was inspired by is to take the horrible stories that are actually in real life in the news for the last year or so since the Dobbs decision, and to incorporate those into a dramatization or a narrative that will highlight some of the atrocities that people are having to go through these days in 2023. So the jail will be kind of the main setting because what they'll do is bring in women for abortion crimes. And that part is a little bit dystopian in the near future, but maybe, unfortunately, by the time the film comes out, that might have actually already happened, that people will be put in jail.
I do believe it has happened, and I think to a minor.
Yeah, I think there was that girl and then her mom.
Right, exactly.
And maybe, I can't remember which one, but one of them pled out. But the other one is, I think you're right, maybe is going to have jail time. So It's already happening, which is horrible. So I guess I wanted to have it be a drama to shine a light on just the whole situation. So I did get inspired by that jail, and it is right here in my hometown. So I thought, gosh, that would be easy. We won't do the sweeping views of the harbor, that part where we.
Yeah. That is an interesting highlight to the jail, though. I mean, my goodness.
It is. So yeah, we'll just have to be strategic with our windows. Anyway, I got inspired by that, and I'm planning to launch a crowdfunding campaign in January. So I'm finishing working up the script right now, and it'll be great to just film here locally, hopefully in a short amount of time. And then the goal would be, like I did last year, to try to get this new film, which is a little bit political, out before the election in 2024.
And that will make it impactful, definitely. This is why women need the fundamental right of bodily autonomy. And that will be the appropriate time to release that film.
Absolutely. I hope I can get it done before then. Now, I feel like my first film, the pro-choice documentary, was really important and impactful. It had a lot of horrible but important messaging and stories. But at the end of the day, it was, a little bit tough to watch because it was heartbreaking in so many ways. And I guess I kind of wanted my next film to be a little more entertaining. So even though I still want to push these kind of pro-choice and feminist messages, I thought if I can dramatize impactful stories with different characters that have backstories that will be meaningful to the audience. So I think that was where I was going as I'm planning for this. And I wanted it to be more of a feature drama instead of a documentary. And in theory, if I could have even half the impact of important films like, for example, Women Talking, which was a recent Sarah Polley film from last year that had a lot of Oscar buzz and was really impactful in the feminist movement as well. So that would be an example of a film that I would love to emulate.
Yeah, an important film. And I would say that your documentary, We're Not Going Back, was cathartic.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. We are close, I think, in age, so we are of a certain generation. We grew up having that full access at all times. We knew it was there. Now it's been just snatched back and just thrown away. And that's why your film is cathartic, because these women in there speak to it. And you have younger women and older women both. So you've kind of gotten the full spectrum.
Thank you. I feel like we all need to stick together and kind of stop hiding in the shadows, which maybe we did for 50 years and why we're in this spot. If we just talk about it more, share our stories, and recognize that I think it's 1 in 4 women are going to have an abortion likely before they're done with their reproductive years.
Even Ted mentioned that in your episode about close to that subject, that I think it was roughly 63% of women who have not had a child do not want to have a child. We're talking about a majority of people who do not want to have a child, yet these privileges are systematically being taken away.
Yeah, and that's why I made the title of the film before the Dobbs decision landed, which was maybe a bit of a mistake. But the idea was we're not going back. We're just not going back. We're not going to stand for it.
Yeah, the fight goes on.
Absolutely.
Hi, folks. If you're just tuning in, today we're talking to filmmaker Pamela Torrance in discussion of her documentary, We're Not Going Back, and how, in a leap of faith, she journeyed from earning a science doctorate to producing her pro-choice documentary. You can also find Pamela at torranceproductions.com, where you'll find her podcasts, her blog posts, and more on reproductive rights. Thank you. Hi, folks. This is your host, Melina Paris. Angel City Culture Quest is growing. We're barely into our 3rd year now, and there's so much more quest-worthy inspiration to bring you. Art, books, film, coverage of local events, and more. We've gotten a new QR code, so you can capture episodes on the go, because I know you're busy. We've been creating artistic flyers unique to each episode, and new Angel City Culture Quest stickers. And there's more to come. As you know, there are costs to keep this podcast going. So, if you're able, join me in this quest with your support. Think of it as a cultural tip jar to share any amount that you're comfortable with. Even a few dollars a month will contribute to my ability to continue bringing you the great work of these artists, activists, and others. and the cultural content that you want to hear about. I would be honored to have your support. To donate, please go to my Patreon link at patreon.com/Angel City Culture Quest. There you can also see all of our past episodes. Thank you.
Time is valuable and good. Please don't direct me to the bed. I'm giving you a minute or else I'll turn my back.
So let's talk about the transition. You came from largely a business background. What's interesting is that while you are a scientist, you transitioned to business selling clinical trials. That was a large portion of your background. And you noted working in sales gave you life skills and gravitas. But during your decade working in sales, your right brain was making plans and working too. You ran a screenwriting meetup group for most of that time. It was for 8 years. So I have two questions. Do you think perhaps screenwriting and collaborative effort may have also added to your gravitas creatively? And what inspired you to initiate a screenwriting meetup?
That's great. Yes, I have been, I guess, a closeted creative now for many years, and I didn't realize it. And I just started having ideas back in like the 2010s-ish. And I thought, gosh, I got to write these down. And I think that's how it starts. And yet I was working in a job that didn't allow me as much creativity. And I guess it was just a hobby that I picked up. I got inspired by screenwriting in general. I took some classes, and then I was living in San Diego, but moved back to the Los Angeles area with the strategic idea that someday I would love to get more involved in the industry. I was interested in getting involved in some sort of a writing group. And there was a meetup. So the meetup group that I ran for 8 years, I actually inherited. It had started soon after I moved here, and I had picked up on it because there were keywords that I had put in the online account. And then the group started. And 3 months later, the guy who started the group had to basically move on because he got a job and had to move. So I just kept going with the group. I don't think I would have started the group because I traveled a lot for work back then, and I think that commitment would have intimidated me. But I was able to pick up a friend who I had met during a screenwriting extension course at UCLA, and she was local. So she sort of helped me, and we tag teamed that group because when I was out of town, she was able to run the group and moderate. So yeah, we went all the way through until the pandemic, and we even Zoomed for a few years, but kind of got tired of Zooming and
Oh,
eventually
yeah.
that group disbanded. But it was such a great experience. And as you point out, like screenwriting can be very lonely, but it was more collaborative. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm more social. So it was a great opportunity to learn through kind of seeing what everybody else is bringing to the table and the different notes that folks were giving each other, and really mastering kind of the art of constructive criticism and helpfulness without hurting anybody's feelings, which doesn't always happen, but tried to make it a positive experience for everybody.
That's a very good skill. So you also have a tagline for your business. It says, dream, create, inspire. And that's what your ultimate goal is with a lot of your work. Can you talk a bit about how that came about?
So technically, I started the business before the whole Dobbs SCOTUS threat came about. So it was back in 2019 that we started filming the first film that came kind of out of the screenwriting group. And I started the business back then. And I always thought that the whole point of telling good stories or helping folks tell their story in a positive light for, say, an advertisement for a business or something like that is to really inspire other people. And I think that was kind of where I wanted to go with this business. And if that's the end goal, how do you get there to inspire people with video or film? First, you got to dream big and have these great ideas. And then you have to physically create them. And that was where I kind of wanted to help with that, bringing the dream to a reality. And then the inspiration is the next step with paying it forward, whether it's your customers, your friends, or just an audience in general. If you're doing a larger film, to be inspired by whatever aspect of their own life is important. So in that vein, I obviously did the pro-choice documentary, and I wanted to inspire people to get to the polls. But that dream, create, inspire can apply to almost anything. Like I said, it could be for a small business trying to figure out how best to reach their customers and showcase what they can do. Or it could be somebody who's older, about ready to retire, and kind of putting together like a memoir type of video or anything. And so I wanted to sort of be a part of that with helping people.
Yeah. And there again, it's inclusive of everybody and anything that they love to do. So can you tell us, Pamela, what is coming up next for you?
Well, I'm hoping to do this whole jail film we talked about. That'll be a big project if I can get it off the ground next year. And that is definitely going to be very exciting. And as kind of a smaller, more small business and videographer, if you will, I'm hoping to tap into a lot of the local small businesses here in town and help them to reach their customers, like I mentioned, and putting together different promos and online social media spots to help them. So I am hoping to market my services more for commissioned work next year.
New year, new work. Yeah,
New year, new work.
that's
And
exciting.
hopefully a lot of exciting things to work on.
Well, keep us posted. And I do want to let listeners know we will have the link to Pamela's documentary, We're Not Going Back, in our show notes. So people can actually see the film there. Thank you, Pamela, for sharing that link with us. That was very generous of you. And watch it, people. It's an amazing film. And like I said, it's cathartic. And I'll leave it there.
I hope that it will be cathartic to watch as well.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you, Pamela, for joining us today.
Thank you very much. This has been fun.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.